Thank you and good morning. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for inviting me to participate in the summit today. I appreciate it. It's a great opportunity to hopefully talk to you guys a little bit about how I got to where I am today, and maybe give you a little inspiration for what you can achieve in life. So I'm going to use a device here for my talk called Draw My Life. It's something I stole from the internet, you know, as we all do. But it's basically, I had a friend of mine who's an artist help me put this together a few years ago. It's because I'm not that good at drawing. But he helped me kind of tell my story through a storyboard here, and let's see if this works. So as Misty said, I work in an industry that's filled with space geeks. I am not a space geek. The people I work with are astrophysicists, they're rocket scientists, they're engineers, they're people that grew up wanting to be astronauts. Cooper, I'm not sure if you want to be an astronaut. By the way, Gordon Cooper, one of the famous Mercury 7. I'm not sure if you're named after him, but you can always use that later on. So these are the people that I basically work with every day. And they're Star Trek fans, they're Star Wars fans. They know every line from every movie. So about 25 years ago, I'm at a meeting at NASA headquarters, and one of the guys there cracks the side, "These are not the droids you're looking for." And the whole room starts laughing, and I'm kind of lost. I'm looking around going, what is he talking about? What's that reference to? And of course, he was talking about Star Wars. You know, a movie came out when I was 12 years old that I saw, but I didn't remember all the lines to. So these are the people that can quote every line from every one of these sci-fi films. They can tell you what ship Han Solo did the Kessel Run in less than 12 parsecs. They know all of these quotes. That is not me, right? So I was born actually in upstate New York. I born and raised in Schenectady. It's an old industrial town, Rust Belt kind of city. It used to be called the city that lights and hauls America. A lot of people think it's Skinny Atlas, that's in the Finger Lakes region. This is closer to the Capital District near Albany and Troy. So it's a town that is filled actually with a lot of engineers. It was home to American Locomotive, where they built steam engines and diesel engines for a long time. And it's where Thomas Edison founded General Electric Company. So all my friends' parents were metallurgists and nuclear engineers and scientists. They worked for the Knowles Atomic Power Research Laboratory. They worked for General Electric's R&D facility. My dad was, by the way, not. He's a salesman, and I ended up being a salesman too. But these are the kind of people that could build anything, they could design anything, they could fix anything. And if you didn't know how something worked, they'd literally sit down with a piece of graph paper and draw you a little chart and diagram to tell you how it worked. What was good about it for me growing up was it instilled in me this kind of sense of curiosity, wanting to know how things worked. I did not have the math and science skills to be able to pursue a career in STEM and engineering, and I ended up going to school in Ohio at a small liberal arts college named Ohio Wesleyan University. And while I was there, I majored in politics and government. I minored in economics management. I had a tremendous liberal arts education. As I said, I'm a soft skills guy, so I learned a lot about these kind of other skills that are not based in science, engineering, technology, engineering, and math. But it was a great education. So what do you do with a little bit off schedule here. So one moment from space that does resonate with me from my college experience was January the 28th of 1986. And that moment, I was standing in the Memorial Union building on campus, and the Challenger space shuttle had just been lost in a tragedy on liftoff, and I'm sure you've all seen the footage. And for my generation, it's a bit like the Kennedy assassination. It's a moment that you remember where you were, what you were doing at that time, and for me, it was galvanizing for me. And one of the few things that I remember strongly enough, and when I think about space and access to space, and particularly the United States and our preeminence in space. So I had a degree in politics and government. Where do you go with a degree in politics and government? You move to Washington, D.C., right? So I moved to Washington, D.C. I got a paying internship on Capitol Hill working for a congressman from Colorado. And I started waiting tables at Armand's Pizzeria on Capitol Hill, which, by the way, as I was sitting there doing my prep talk today, I thought, I served Joe Biden pizza several times. He would come in with his chief of staff. He'd have pizza. He'd get on the train and come back up to Delaware every day. I actually got to know him and a number of the politicians that worked. It was on the Senate side. So I did that for about 8 months. And then I decided it was time to try something new. And I got on a presidential campaign and moved up to the state of New Hampshire. So this is the 1988 presidential cycle. I moved up there. I got to meet every candidate you can imagine back then. So Mike Dukakis and George Bush, Sr., Pierre DuPont, in fact, was running for president back then. And it was a great opportunity for me. I became the assistant state director. I opened offices all over the state. I got to work with the Secret Service. Mind you, I'm 23 years old at this point in time. I had never worked on a political campaign before, not even for dog catcher. And now I'm working on a presidential campaign. But it was a fantastic experience, and I really learned a lot. But at the end, my guy lost. And I decided maybe campaign politics was not for me, or politics in general, and maybe I should try to reinvent myself. And so I decided to go back. And everybody said, go to law school. You'd love going to law school. I said, I don't want to be a lawyer. They said, oh, you don't have to be a lawyer. I said, I think I'm going to look at business and see if I can do something in business where I could have skills that were transferable. So I applied to business school. I applied actually to 5 schools, and I got into 4 of the 5, and I was waitlisted at 1. Georgetown University. And I said, you know, Georgetown's really the top of my list. This is where I want to go to school. I want to move back to Washington, D.C. I'm going to get on a plane, and I did, and I flew down to Washington, D.C., and I called up the school, and I said, I'd like to meet with the dean. And they're like, really? And I said, yeah, I want to meet with the dean. I'm on the wait list. And they said, all right, you know, he'll give you an audience for 15 minutes. And so I went into the dean of the business school, and I said, look, you know, I applied to 5 business schools, and I got into 4. But you guys put me on the wait list. But this is really where I want to go to school, right? And if you let me in, you won't be disappointed. I'm going to do a great job. I'm going to study hard. I'm going to get involved in student government. And when I graduate, I'm going to give back to the university. And I think, to be honest with you, nobody had ever done that before, because he kind of looked at me sideways. It was a very strange conversation. He said, go take a walk for 20 minutes and come back, and let me think about it. So I went out and sat on the quad. I came back in 20 minutes, and he was standing there. And he had my transcript in his hands when I got back into his office. And he said, look, I admire what you did coming down here. I'm going to let you into school, but I'm looking at your transcript, and you never took calculus in college. And so if you want to get into Georgetown, you got to go take calculus. So I said, all right, you're on. Now, mind you, I had not taken math in 6 years, okay? So I moved home, back up to Schenectady. I had to really call up my high school math teacher because I didn't even remember algebra at that point. I got a job in a corrugated box factory. So I was working on an assembly line during the day. I was getting tutored in high school math in the afternoons, and I enrolled in a local college and took calculus at night. It was a great summer, really a lot of fun. Not so much. So as the story goes, I studied hard, I worked hard. It was the least fun summer of my entire life. And at the end, I literally took my final exam. I walked up to the professor, I handed it to him. He's grading it all right in front of me. And I said, Professor, I need this to get into grad school. And he looked at me and he looked at the paper and he said, C-. I'm into Georgetown. So yeah, here's just a drawing of the box factory. Sorry, I forgot to click on that. It doesn't really look like that in a box factory. I go to Georgetown. I major in marketing and international business. And one of the things I got involved in the marketing club, and I go to do a case competition at Wake Forest University in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And I was the presenter for the team. And I guess I did a good job because they ended up calling me back for an interview to be a brand manager for Planners Lifesavers, which was based there, and they were the sponsors for this event. And so I went down there and interviewed, and I guess I did well in the interview. But one of my last questions was, well, how long does it take me to start doing something on the international side? Because I like global business. I want to do something. I never really traveled outside the United States. Canada from upstate New York is exotic, but that was about it for me in terms of international travel. So they said, well, it'll take about 7 or 8 years. If you do well working in the Midwest region, hard-rolled candy sales, then maybe we'll let you go do something international. I said, that seems like an awfully long time. For somebody who's 25 years old, that seemed like eons to me. So I decided instead to apply for something called the Presidential Management Internship, which is a management training program for the federal government. And it's a competitive program. It's usually people that, not MBAs, but go to the Kennedy School of Government, Georgetown School of Foreign Service, or Woodrow Wilson at Princeton. It's a very competitive program, and I wasn't sure I had a shot at getting in, but I did well enough in the interview that I got a job offer to work for the U.S. Department of Commerce in the International Trade Administration, which was great. I got to work on NAFTA, President's Export Council, and a trade center. And finally one day, there was a job opening that came up in the Office of Aerospace. And so I went down to meet with Sally Bath, who was the office director, and I sat there to interview with her. And she said, you got to come work for this office. You get to work on trade promotion, which is basically going to air shows all around the world. So that sounded like fun. Go to the Paris Air Show, the Dubai Air Show. And the other part of the job was the space portfolio. And I kind of looked at her and said, space like satellites and rockets? She's like, yeah, satellites and rockets. I said, I don't know anything about space. She said, don't worry, you'll learn. Just, take the job. So I took the job. I started reading everything I could. 3 months later, I'm on a US trade delegation in Moscow in the dead of winter, and I'm trying to figure out why I'm there. I'm 28 years old. I'm with the US Trade Representative's Office, State Department, Defense Department, and we're there to negotiate an agreement so that the Russians could be allowed to launch US-made satellites on their rockets. And I'm standing in a rocket factory in Moscow. It's owned by Khrushchev State Research Corporation, one of the few Americans that had ever been allowed to enter that facility. It had been a secret facility for a long time. And I'm standing there amongst these giant proton rockets, and I'm wondering, like, this is a career? This is something that you could actually make money at and do as a business? And I decided then and there that I wanted to pursue a career in space. So I did that for about 3 years, and then was an analyst at the Commerce Department, and then a friend of mine called me up one day and said, hey, they're starting a trade association for the satellite industry. And I'm like, a trade association? He said, yeah, they're looking for somebody to run it, and you'd be the perfect guy because you know all these people in space. I'm like, who grows up wanting to run a trade association? Like, that is not a career aspirational goal. But, I was sitting there talking to my fiance at the time, and she said, well, you're going to get to meet all the presidents and CEOs of all these companies in the industry. That could be a good thing if you actually want to work in the industry. So I said, all right, that makes good sense. So I took the job and as the first executive director of SIA. And as it turned out, it was a great training for me. I ended up getting to go on TV. I did NPR radio. I did CBS Evening News and PBS. I got to testify before Congress, several congressional committees. I did filings for the FCC. And I get to meet all the CEOs and executives in the industry, which was really a lot of fun for me. So it was a great opportunity. I did it for 6 years. And then another guy who had been on my board called me up and said, hey, you know everybody in the satellite industry. How would you like to sell rocket launches working for a company called Ariane Space? I said, well, there's 2 issues here. One is I'm not a rocket scientist. And number 2 is I don't speak French. They said, don't worry about it. Come to Paris. We'll take you down to the headquarters. You'll get to meet everybody. In fact, they didn't really want me to speak French. They really wanted me to speak English because I was going to be based in the US, selling to US satellite companies and actually helping lobby as well with US Congress. So it ended up being a perfect match for me to work for them. And I did that actually for 15 years of my life. And it was interesting getting to work there. I made a lot of faux pas, which is French for mistakes. I know there's no French people in the audience tonight, so I can speak French and nobody will know that I'm making mistakes. But they also knew, I think, at the company, because I wasn't an engineer, to keep me away from any buttons and any technology that I could screw up, because the launch industry can be a very binary industry. And so, no, in French, don't touch the button. I did that for 15 years. During the course of that part of my career, this was in the early stages of that, 2001, 2003, we had 2 launch failures almost back to back within 18 months on our Ariane 5 vehicle. We were transitioning from the storied Ariane 4 rocket, which had over 100 successful flights, to the Ariane 5, this new fledgling large launch vehicle. I had to go out and talk to all the customers about these launch failures, and that was a lot of, it was challenging for me to be able to talk about the problems we were having in the company. And then the other thing that happened during that time period was in 2001, the internet bubble burst, right? So there was this huge acceleration in the stock market and all these .com companies, and then all of a sudden the air came out of that market. It deflated. The number of satellites being built and launched dropped from about 30 to less than 10. And I really was trying to figure out if I had made the right move to go work for this company or not. Was the industry finished? Had I made the wrong decision? And again, now my wife, I'm talking to my wife, who's always my guide in all these things, and she said to me, look, I think you should stick it out. This is a great opportunity for you. You're learning a lot in this company, and see how it goes for another few years. Well, as it turns out, I ended up staying for 15 years at Ariane Space and had a great run there. So From there, another friend of mine who was on my board of an organization I was on encouraged me to come, and so in fact he was on the board of directors for the SSPI that I worked for, and later for Future Space Leaders. But my point here is that get involved in organizations. Every industry has organizations. The folks that are volunteering here for this conference that are setting this up, this is a great way for you to network, to meet people, to network up and down, I always say, because I want to meet young people, because you guys are going to be the leaders in 10 years, and I'm going to call you and ask you for a favor. So you're going to ask me for advice now. I'm going to try to give you advice, but also works the other way around once you guys get established. So a few years ago, with some friends of mine, established an organization called the Future Space Leaders Foundation. And we set this thing up so that young people, basically graduate students and young professionals, could have the opportunity to go around to conferences, present papers, go internationally, do public speaking. And so we set this organization up. A bunch of friends of mine, again, this same guy, Brad Alexander, who was the guy who brought me to Blue Origin, was on the board of that organization. And so far, we've raised close to $500,000. We've sent over 40 young professionals and students around the world to give papers at conferences in Adelaide, Australia, in Beijing, China, in Jerusalem, and in Toronto, Canada. We've got a conference coming up this fall. Anyways, it's been, for me, probably the most rewarding thing I do in my career is that, as opposed to my job. I know selling rockets sounds fun, but actually watching young people work on their future is even more fun than that. So about 3 years ago, I was in Colorado Springs, and I ended up at a cocktail party. Again, this friend of mine, Brett, said, come to this cocktail party, and he took me in the back, and I got to meet a man named Jeff Bezos in the back. And Jeff Bezos had started this company, founded this company, Blue Origin, about actually 17 years earlier than that. And he had this idea about going to space and finding a way to go to space. In fact, he gave his high school valedictorian speech about trying to go to space and what we need to do to go to space. And the company is founded on this idea of reusable rockets, that the only way to lower the cost of access to space is by using reusable rockets. And so I ended up talking to him, I ended up interviewing with the company, I ended up getting the job, and my second week on the job, they take me to West Texas, where you see this video of our New Shepard rocket flying and landing and the capsule, and I got to see a rocket launch. It was mission number 6 of the New Shepard vehicle. It's now flown 10 consecutive times in a row. We've had 12 touchdowns with the capsule, and we did a bunch of escapes tests, and I got to see that, and it was just amazing to me. So our goal with this vehicle and this capsule you see in front of you is to take people to space. Right? We want people to have the overview effect. We want them to experience microgravity, to be able to float around in space for several minutes. And we're doing right now microgravity research experiments for NASA on board this vehicle. So you get a sense of what the seats look like inside this capsule. We're testing it now. We've got the actual capsule and the booster down in Texas that we're going to fly people on, hopefully by the end of this year, if we stay on track. And then we're going to start selling tickets next year. And so people can actually buy a ticket and go to space. The other vehicle we're working on is called New Glenn. By the way, New Shepard, named after, anybody? Alan Shepard, first American in space. New Glenn, named after John Glenn, first American to orbit the Earth, right? So you get the trend. I'm not sure what comes next, maybe Armstrong. By the way, we just celebrated the 50th anniversary of Apollo 11, walking on the moon. If you haven't seen anything about that, you must live under a rock, because it was kind of everywhere, even on the Washington Monument. So New Glenn is our orbital vehicle, orbital class vehicle. It's a vehicle that's so large we have to build it down in Cape Canaveral Air Force Station, just outside the gates of the Kennedy Space Center, and that's where we're going to build and launch this thing, because it's so big we can't really transport this thing over any road in the United States. But it's an exciting job, it's an exciting place to be, and we're really trying to figure out how do we lower the cost of space and make it accessible to everyone. So just to wrap up, just a few things about my career, how I got to where I am, and any advice that I can give you. Number one is, if there's anything I'm a testament to, is confidence, maybe overconfidence sometime. You got to go down and you got to put it on the line sometimes, and you got to go after what you want. You got to look for opportunities. We're always talking about two-way doors in my household. So if you see opportunities that go there, go and take that opportunity, seize that opportunity, as long as it's a two-way door. If it's a one-way door, which means you can't go back, You don't want to take that necessarily, or that's a very calculated risk. If it's a two-way door, you should be able to try to seize that opportunity. Have a positive attitude. Persevere, because sometimes life is tough and you got to work in a box factory and take calculus at night. It's not fun. Be tenacious. Don't give up. And be optimistic, right? This is an incredible time that we're living in right now in this new digital age. There's amazing opportunities. There's stuff, most of the jobs, as you know, haven't even been invented yet that we're about to take on. I had no idea I was going to work in the rocket industry when I grew up in Schenectady, New York. And now I'm here working for Jeff Bezos in the rocket industry. So look, be optimistic about that. The future is there. There's a tremendous amount of opportunity out there, and I know you guys are going to seize that and do great. Thank you. One more thing. Of course, now I know what ship made the Kessel Run in less than 12 parsecs. Anybody? Millennium Falcon. There you go.